Welcome to Unlearning Out Loud. I'm still Sid. This is our first episode officially. I'd like to welcome my friend and coworker, Savarie Farrell. Welcome to the pod.
Thank you so much for having me. So excited.
So excited. Thank you so much for being here. Now, this is our first episode. We're going to be talking about what I think is a really important topic today. Today, we're going to be talking about grooming. But first, I want you to just introduce yourself a little bit so I know who you are, but so other people know who you are too.
Yeah, of course. Well, for work and such, because we do work together, I'm a prevention educator, a crime prevention educator, mostly specializing in youth-based crime prevention efforts, so a lot of school-based prevention, where we talk about majority child abuse prevention, but healthy relationships, bystander intervention for stuff like bullying, harassment, sexual assault. So a big, wide range of topics that we're able to talk about, but part of some of the lessons that we do and some of the presentations that we're able to develop, I've gotten the chance to speak with some young people and get some presentations together to talk about grooming a little bit more. So excited to be talking about the topic. It's a little weird to say, but it's like something I enjoy to talk about, talking about.
Yeah, that's why we do what we do, because even though it is really hard to talk about, they're not fun topics to talk about. It's not fun stuff, but we have a lot of fun, us and our team, and having those conversations. I'm glad you're here. I think grooming is something that is becoming, unfortunately, more and more frequent. But before we really dive in, I want to start by just talking about what is grooming.
Yes. So grooming is the process where an adult or sometimes even like an older youth, maybe someone who's still in their teenagers, but is still in their teenage years, but is technically an adult, tries to develop a relationship with a child. There are some like steps there, some of which being like breaking down those barriers, the desensitization to things that we would be able to see are red flags and are unsafe, but kind of being able to slowly or sometimes really subtly break down those barriers with children to then develop a close relationship with them where then they might try to abuse or exploit the child, but the child doesn't always recognize those signs as it's leading up to it until maybe some of the harm starts to happen. And then there's usually like a period of follow-up where there's secrets, there's maybe threats, or maybe there's bribes or gifts to try to keep a child within that sort of relationship.
Yeah, right? Those are some of those red flags, right? Like you said, those buying gifts, those kind of unsafe secrets like we talk about when we do this. Now, I have a couple clarifying questions that I have for you. With grooming, is it always sexual?
Well, when we're thinking about most grooming relationships, I'd say that a lot of them do have that sexual nature. I mean, grooming can happen both in person and online. A lot of the times we do see that it's for the purpose of sexual abuse or for like receiving or creating and distributing child sexual abuse material. But there are some circumstances that I can think of where maybe a child is groomed into like a situation that's maybe unhealthy for them, or maybe they're groomed into a situation that's still sexual in nature, but it's not someone being like touched physically.
Yeah.
What I'm thinking about is like the kitty influencer kind of stuff where you think about some of these really young influencers who maybe they've got the momager who's kind of like running all of their stuff, and they've maybe started making content as young as like before their teen years, and now they've developed a fan base of other young people. And as they get older, people in the comments are being nasty. Usually adults are. A majority of the time when we're talking about these cases, it's a young female and an adult male, but it can look different gender-wise too. But a lot of the times these guys are sending creepy messages, and then these girls, they'll turn 18, and what do? Start an OnlyFans.
Right.
So that could maybe be an example of grooming where we're kind of breaking down the barrier, the boundaries of like what's safe or maybe what's healthy for us in relationships. Maybe once they turn 18, it's not technically illegal. But that kind of question of what is there still harm taking place, or was there harm in kind of the lead up to it of the sexualization of this child, or the countdown until they're 18 when they're still a teenager? And
yeah, that's exactly what I was gonna say. I remember seeing, I think it was Natalie Portman talk about how when she was younger growing up, it was always like there was in magazines, oh, this many days until she turns 18, which is just so, it's so creepy and unfortunate. But like you said in those comments, especially on social media, it's like, oh, 18th birthday, OnlyFans launching. But if it's launching on midnight at the 18th birthday, are they really 18 in the videos and the content that's on that OnlyFans?
Yeah. So it's got, I would still think that would fall under like kind of the category of grooming there, where again we're breaking down those barriers or those boundaries that we find to be healthy or appropriate, especially when we're thinking about while they're still minors, and then kind of like feeling maybe stuck in that situation.
Yeah. Now, with grooming, is there always an age gap that happens there?
I think a lot of the times we do associate an age gap, maybe a larger one. A lot of the times maybe an adult who's already established, so probably out of college, working in some professional capacity. Because grooming, I always think about it taking place in three main places known to the child, because we know most of the time when children are being abused, they're being abused by someone that they know. That's, I feel like
we say it all the time.
I feel like a broken record when I say that, but that is something that when we're talking to kids and young people, always trying to emphasize, like, hey, we need to be looking for red flags everywhere. So if we're breaking it down into the community, people in our community that we might know that might cause us harm, people at school, or like kind of school related events, and then adding in the layer of family as well. So that can a lot of the times look like much older adults, but it could also be that maybe situation of somebody who's in like their early adult years, maybe that 18, 19, 20, someone in college dipping back into high school. Something I always say is a red flag.
Yeah.
Because why do college girls not want to date these guys?
No, exactly. We always say that. It's like, well, why don't they want to date? Why doesn't someone their age want to date them? That would be a red flag for sure.
Yes, but with maybe with like online examples, you don't always know what that age gap looks like, or
because a lot of the times we don't know, and we say that to the kids all the time when we do our work is, well, if I'm online and I'm talking to someone and they say they're 15, do I really know if they're 15 or not?
Yes, yeah. And even with new restrictions and stuff, I know we read through the new rules for chatting on Roblox the other day, and I'm like, this still seems like
lots of get around.
A 10-year-old could be talking to a 16-year-old on Roblox, which...
Right, and it's all AI based. I know the kids have been talking about, oh, I know someone whose parent went and did the scan for them, so it said that they were older.
Yes.
Things like that, or there's lots of get arounds, or the AI is not always the most accurate.
Yep, and they're angry about it, but there's a reason.
Exactly.
Why they're doing these things.
Now, I know when we talk about different red flags, and you've named a lot of, I think, really important and good ones, a lot of the times when we think of grooming, we're thinking about, like, oh, that special treatment that person is giving that person. I want to talk a little bit of what that can look like in a red flag way, but also what a healthy version of that can look like if there is one.
Yeah, that's a... I like that, talking about the healthy stuff. I was just doing a staff presentation on this week, and I was able to kind of talk about boundary settings with a room of adults and kind of being like, hey, if adults are going to harm a kid, they're a lot of the times working in the same capacity that you guys are. So let's do a little double check of our boundaries. But how that might look, that special treatment can come in a lot of different ways. If we're like breaking it down, like let's start with like online, special treatment online. It could be as simple as like somebody sending somebody money over a game, or like sending them Robux or money for Fortnite. I don't know what that one's called, but I'm not sure about that one. or gift cards. I know that that's always a big one because you can send gift cards electronically now too.
Right.
So that can be something that's just like sent to an email. And we don't need to have like a physical kind of copy or interaction there. In person, depending on like who we're thinking about here, maybe if it's at school or if it's a coach, it could be maybe giving that person like extra help or better grades without maybe there being having earned something there. Maybe they're giving them special treatment on the team if it's like a team based sport. I'm trying to think what else they could be doing.
What is like a healthy relationship, especially when we're thinking like
in
older
schools.
adults or adults like you said that are maybe in those
Yeah,
roles
I
look
think
like?
I think like recognizing good work and praise is something that we all want to do when it comes to the young people in our lives. So I think that there is a way to do that without like giving a kid a gift or making them feel uncomfortable or giving them a lot of the times when people are like giving gifts for grooming, it's like gifts or it's stuff that like the parents wouldn't maybe approve of all the time. Like a lot of cases of maybe like giving a kid drugs or alcohol, or I saw one case where it was not me personally, but I heard about one case where it was like a female teacher who was trying to groom a young boy and had like bought the kid a BB gun.
Oh,
because he was really into that, but like
the parents wouldn't want that.
His parents wouldn't want him to have a BB gun, so maybe that special treatment from an adult, it's to like sometimes look cool too. So like the drugs and alcohol, that plays a big part where like kids are curious about stuff like that, or they see certain things and they say that's something that I really want. Maybe my family doesn't have the money, or maybe this isn't something that I'm going to be able to realistically have. So if someone's offering it to me, then
how could that be a red flag?
how could that be a red flag? So I think if we're trying to be healthy, then definitely staying within those boundaries, putting ourselves in other people's shoes, I think is always good. So like thinking, like if I had a kid, would I want an adult in their life to step over me as their kind of like authority, the person who's giving them rules and do something like that.
Right. Especially in a secretive way. Like,
yes.
We talk a lot about those like kind of red flag phrases of like, oh, well, you know, don't tell anybody that I'm the one that got you that. Or the one that I think of the most, and I think especially when you're in those like high school years, especially you're so mature for your age.
Yep. That's a huge one. You're so mature for your age, which is, again, why aren't we with someone who's our age? Like, there's definitely something that's going on there. So the idea of being so mature for your age, or like other girls just don't understand me, and like you just really get me, and
right? Or even like, you know, we can't tell other people about our relationship because they won't understand our relationship.
Yes, yeah. There's that boundary breaking down of like what's normal, or what's healthy, what's okay. It can really look like that where someone's, I mean, we talk about love bombing a lot, where someone gets really intense and they're just like, I love you, you're my everything. Maybe once that relationship's developed, I know we see a lot of times where once they have some sort of relationship, the abuser using threats of harm to themselves is a big thing, where it's like, if you stop talking to me, I'm gonna kill myself, or I'm gonna hurt myself.
Right.
That could be young kids. They're empathetic. Many of them are. So many of them are empathetic. So thinking about it, even if they know that it's not right, and maybe they want it to stop, and they've expressed that they want it to stop, now an abuser is switching it around and saying, well,
if you break up with me, I'm gonna kill myself. Right. And especially when you are younger, you're like, oh my gosh, I can't tell anyone about this. I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And sometimes even that person, that abuser, will say, well, if you tell anyone that I said that, then I'm going to also kill myself. You know, weaponizing those unsafe secrets like we talk about all the time with the kiddos.
The weaponizing of those unsafe secrets, I always think, especially in families, where part of that weaponization is the idea of some sort of like local government entity coming in and taking the kids out. So
Yeah.
if you report me, I'm going to go to jail forever, and
Right.
you're going to be living in a foster home where things are going to be so much worse because you're going to get taken away from your family.
Yeah.
And that's a crazy huge barrier and something that's really hard. I think when we're talking to kids and they express something like that, that's maybe one of the harder things where you have to like emphasize like you still deserve to be safe.
Right.
Even if it's not the outcome that you're looking for, even though it's disappointing. And you
It's
should
so hard.
I'm like
It's so hard.
but you deserve to be happy and healthy and safe, and no matter what that looks like, even if maybe we think that this is is not a situation that we'd want, they still deserve to be able to be kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's I think one of the hardest conversations to have is about what if an abuser is saying I'm going to be taken away from my home,
Yeah.
or maybe younger siblings.
Yeah. Especially when it's like bringing other people into it, especially other people
Yep.
that they really love and care about. It's like, okay, well, now this isn't just going to affect me. It could affect siblings, or it could affect maybe other parents or other adults in the house.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the hardest part of our job right there.
Yes. Yep.
Right. I want to switch just a little bit. I want to talk about kind of on a cultural level. I think grooming, like we said in the beginning, is something that we're seeing more and more, especially with access to social media and the internet, but also like in media, those examples that we see of grooming. How do you think that impacts how our culture kind of minimizes what grooming is and what it looks like?
Yeah, I thought of a really good example yesterday when I was thinking about this. Do you remember when those pictures came out of Bradley Cooper and he was in that New York City park with a very young Suki Waterhouse?
Yes. Yes,
And
I do.
She was head in his lap and he was reading her Lolita.
Which is so on the nose, because Lolita is one of the things I think about with grooming.
And it's like, what are we doing? So there's an age gap there, and not all age gap relationships are going to be technically considered grooming. I think especially for like able-bodied adults.
Yeah.
Even if
Even if they're a little weird.
Even if they're not our favorite thing. Or even if they still have some red flags for being maybe unhealthy with that power dynamic.
Yeah. Even I think of like in Friends, how Monica ends up dating one of her dad's friends that she knew from when she was a kid. Like even though she's in her 20s and it's like, okay, that, she's an adult, but he knew her when she was a kid.
Yeah. I think like Aaron Taylor Johnson.
Yes. Yes.
That's a big example that I think a lot of people talk about on social media. Maybe to too much of an extent now. You feel bad for the guy now that he's like in his 30s and he's parented these children. But they met on a set when he was like 16, 17, I think. Yeah. And there's a big age gap there. A lot older and already had children. And so he turned 18. They started dating, got married, and he was then like father to her children who
are such like, a young age.
Maybe like 10 years younger than him.
So even like with Pretty Little Liars,
Arya the teacher,
and Ezra,
that's a good one.
That's like I think when I was growing up and was a teenager watching that. But it's like, you watch and you're like, oh my God, I want that. They're so cute. That's my relationship goals. But then you get older and you're like, actually, that's so creepy.
That's so not okay. Yeah. So we really normalized that, though. I mean, that was a whole storyline where that was just kind of the situation that it was. And I think we think about those storylines a lot when it comes to TV shows and movies and books even now, where we're talking about those age gap relationships. A lot of the times not using underage people, but in this case it was someone who was in high school. Maybe was 18, but there are still problematic things there. Yeah. I think the way that we portray the grooming, especially maybe with those examples of those young kids online, the influencers who are then moving on to be OnlyFans creators, and that sort of grooming into that sort of hypersexualized behavior when they're in their teenage years. I mean, ABC News even covered it. Yeah. And for Piper Raquel and poor Piper.
Poor Piper.
Well, really, that was the momager to the max,
Yeah.
where she had already had content behind a paywall while she was a teenager that her mom was running. So what kind of content was that? Bikini
Right.
pictures? Awesome.
Right.
That's
Of a child.
of a child.
That people are paying for, which just adds
Yeah.
that added layer
But
of...
then ABC News did the coverage of after she turned 18 and how much money she had made.
Right.
And how it's so empowering for her to be able to do this. And
Right. And other
Yeah.
lots of young girls, maybe just
Yes.
generally young people see that and that, like, quote unquote OnlyFans success.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can do that and I can make so much money. But in reality, we know that it's such a small percent of those OnlyFans
yes.
creators that are making that much money. I think the average that people pull in like a month is like a couple $100s.
I think it was like $300 or something.
Yeah.
Is the average for all of the OnlyFans users. And then the people who do make it big, that's not self-made business. They have managers who are taking huge
Right.
amounts of that money, where it's pretty much like they're a pimp.
Yeah. In an online way. Yeah.
In an online way, it's like there's people who manage a bunch of OnlyFans people, and that's how you get a bunch of subscribers and a bunch of followers. But
It's like a business.
it's a business.
really.
But then that's not empowerment at this point, because then you're working under somebody, and it's maybe that has a consent issue again, where
Right. And those power dynamics.
yeah. But if we start breaking down those boundaries with really young kids, I mean, I had kids bring it up in a 5th grade classroom.
Ooh.
Bring up OnlyFans. And one of them said, yeah, it's really bad, but you can make a lot of money doing it.
Yeah.
like,
And that's
okay.
what most of them think.
So it's like, okay, so we're breaking down the boundaries really, really early, and we're not really thinking about it. And not really letting the kids be kids.
Yeah. If that's like, I remember when I was a substitute teacher even, and just having that casual conversation. Oh, what do you guys want to be when you grow up? In 6th grade, they're like, oh, I want to do OnlyFans. I just want to be a millionaire. I want to be a billionaire. Whatever that looks like. Or they say, I want to be like Andrew Tate. And I'm like,
Oh, good.
okay.
Another good example.
Why? What is the reason that that's what we're aspiring? And almost always, all the examples they'd say, well, I want to make money, whether it's OnlyFans or it's this or it's that. When, again, in reality, it's not the average Joe who's going on OnlyFans and making lots and lots of money.
And breaking down those boundaries, I even talked about this with the teachers that I was talking to last week, where I said, even if you have good intentions, if you're doing stuff that's breaking down boundaries and making kids feel like this stuff is normal, someone with bad intentions might come along, and kids then won't identify
Right.
that
That is a red flag.
that these behaviors are a red flag. Because when I was talking with the teachers, we were talking about the idea of teachers talking to students about their crushes and who they're dating. I said, that's problematic.
Yeah.
Even if you think like, well, that's cute, and
Yeah, I just like to be in the know.
I want to sit them next to their crush, so they can have that really sweet little childhood memory. And it's like, well, now they're getting used to talking to adults who are in authority positions over them about things that those adults shouldn't be talking to them about.
Yeah.
So now next time when someone asks them something about their crush or who they want to date, and then things continue to progress where now we're talking about, oh, well, have you kissed anybody yet? Or how far have you gone with someone yet from an adult? Then that maybe feels a little bit more normal for that kid, even if you had good intentions. So
Well, I talk with so-and-so about that at school, and they're an adult, so maybe it's a normal thing that adults ask.
yes. So then if an adult comes along with bad intentions, they've got no idea that that things could get really bad. Because the grooming process can take a really long time sometimes. We can see that taking years.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a lot shorter. I mean, it can happen very quickly as well. But it can stretch a really long amount of time. So if we're starting to allow those boundaries to be broken down about what's healthy and what's safe, then it really just confuses things.
Yeah. Now, I know we talked a lot about like younger people. If I'm younger and I notice these red flags in maybe one of what my friends is like talking about, or I see that one of my friends is maybe in, whether it's online or in person, in a grooming situation, how are friends able to intervene, or what could that look like in a way where it's not going to make things worse? Because I know when we do this, whether we're talking about, oh, my friend said they were sexually assaulted, or my friend said this happened, not wanting them to feel like they have to do anything they don't want to, or make them kind of get defensive and shrink down.
Yeah, that's always a tricky situation because, I mean, even when we're talking with students about this and we ask, like, is my friend always going to listen to me when I tell them that something isn't right? And a lot of the times, no.
Yeah.
Like, people get really stubborn with situations like this, especially if they think that it's benefiting them in some way, or if they're scared, obviously, because these situations are really scary. But listening first, no matter like what's going on and any sort of like traumatic thing happening with a friend, always being that good ear, not making assumptions, not jumping into things, being there and listening, pointing out those red flags, saying, "Hey, I don't know if this seems like a good idea." But then, like, at the end of the day, not keeping secrets for your friends if they're gonna be secrets that get your friends hurt. And that's something
that's really hard.
I know nowadays it's like, I'm the biggest narc. I'm like, I am not cool. You come and tell me something, I'm running and telling somebody else because it's like your safety is going to be what's most important, and sometimes that wake up call is needed.
Yeah.
I know we were just talking with students about healthy and or safe and unsafe secrets, and we used like a Roblox example, like, oh, well, what if your friend told you that they were going to go meet up with someone that they met on Roblox and they asked you not to tell anybody? We had a bunch of students who said, well, I don't know.
It could be fine.
My friend asked me not to tell. I probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
It's like,
right, but is that a red flag? Is that something that could be unsafe or dangerous?
Yes. It's maybe, I mean, younger kids and even teenagers don't really have any idea of their own mortality.
Yeah.
and sometimes just need a little bit more information about the fact that they're not immortal. And that things can happen and bad stuff can happen even to kids. So having a good conversation about it, trying your best to support your friend and like get your friend help, I think is really important. Having more conversations about these, like at like even just like in friend groups.
Yeah.
When we're talking about healthy, unhealthy signs of relationships, and I am talking with like middle school, high schoolers about it, like these are great prompts to just like bring to your girlfriends. Like, like sit down and like start talking about this stuff so you don't have to go through that like horrible cattiness where me and my bestie aren't friends anymore because I didn't agree with her college-age boyfriend and I told her that and she was not receptive to it.
Yeah, that's part of why I think I wanted to do this was like growing up. We never talked about that in health class. I didn't have health class until I got to high school and never had those conversations. And I think we grew up in an interesting time, like media-wise, where like we had the flip phones and then we had the iPod Touch and then Instagram was a thing. And it was an interesting time to grow up. But even then, seeing things online, talking to random strangers on the internet all of the time.
Kick.
Yes, kick. R.I.P., but not in peace. Get rid of that thing. Yeah. But really, it's like I wasn't having those conversations at home, at school, with my friends, because it felt so, like, taboo, for lack of a better word. It was like, oh, if I bring this up, then, like, I'm starting something. So kind of the point of why I think wanting to do this, even when I was doing work in college, it was like, oh, we don't talk about sexual assault and what consent looks like.
And even when we are talking to kids about it, sometimes their immediate reaction will be like, whoa, this is inappropriate.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not that it's inappropriate. It's uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Sure, it's uncomfortable to talk about. I would understand that kids don't want to talk about things of the sexual nature with adults, especially adults that they know really well. That's kind of like the benefit of having us come in and we're like, we see you guys
there for a day.
We see you guys once a year. You can kind of say whatever you want and we'll have that conversation. but it's uncomfortable conversations, but it's not inappropriate.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I think that's a really important distinction.
We never get explicit with kids. I would not want to do that.
No.
No.
Not at all.
I'm not out here teaching some janky sex ed to students.
No. We're just talking about secrets, unsafe secrets.
No.
Those important things, especially I think starting so young. That way,
Yes.
those conversations, they don't feel as stigmatized and uncomfortable because they're, even if it's just once a year when we see them, at least they're growing up being like, oh, I can talk about that and I'm not going to get in trouble for talking about it. I'm supposed to talk about it.
And the really little kids don't even bat an eye.
No.
you could get into it with them and they're like, okay.
Okay, that's fine.
Sounds good.
Makes sense.
they hit like second, third grade, and like maybe the boys will start to look at each other like, I think she's saying something naughty.
Especially when we talk about inappropriate images.
Oh my gosh.
All the kids look at each other and they tell on themselves because they're like, inappropriate images.
I have eyes.
Yeah, I can. You're telling on yourself. I can see you.
I can see you saying that. Yeah. So they sure are special, but
yeah, but it's part of those, those conversations. The more we have them, the easier it is to talk about.
mm-hmm.
Now, when we're talking about, why I wanted to do this and destigmatizing those conversations, trying to pick a podcast name, so hard. But I was really focused on, that unlearning part, especially growing up, not having those conversations, the things that we're learning, whether that's from media or celebrities or influencers, wherever those influences do come from, having to maybe unlearn some of those things that we just absorbed. And I think a big part of that is kind of like doing some myth busting on our part.
Yes.
So I'm not sure if this will be a segment and what I'll call it, but I would love to do some myth busting. So what's a myth related to grooming in any way that you'd like to really set, this is a myth, this is not what that actually looks like?
Yeah, I think a big one is about the perpetrators and what that looks like. We have the idea in our head of like young girl and an older male, and whether that's someone in the family or the teacher at school or something like that. Grooming is so non-specific to gender and to sexuality even, which might make that barrier even harder sometimes for kids to reach out and ask for help. So this happens with anybody. I mean, we see a lot of cases, unfortunately, of female teachers being aggressive or assaulting young male students, or we see cases of maybe that like really young person, or even like that like child on child sexual abuse, where maybe like an older cousin or someone who's in the family and is around is displaying some sort of like problematic sexual behavior when we're like growing up, kind of thing. So not thinking that all cases of grooming like look the same way. Like it's like we just need to be looking at like the men in our kids' lives and who they are. We need to be looking at everybody in our kids' lives, and especially, I mean, I think a lot of people are aware of like stuff going on in churches and things like that. That's something that we've talked about a lot, but like youth groups and like people associated with youth groups, I think that's really important to highlight that it's coming from all over the place. It's not just the coach at school or the male teacher at school, although it can be. We all know that those do happen because we've all got stories from our high schools or from neighboring ones. But it could also be women, or it could also be people from different age ranges. I mean,
or even an older male grooming a younger male. Like you said, the sexuality doesn't matter.
Yeah, or a female grooming a female. I mean, that happens as well, where that added maybe stigma of sexuality playing a role in it, especially with young people who maybe are still figuring stuff out. They're still making their way through it, although things are a lot easier, I would say, nowadays than maybe when we were growing up. And even before that, it's a lot worse. But nowadays, I think it's a little bit easier, but still, it would be hard to talk about. Or the situation with like the older female and the young male, and then all of the guy's friends are like, well, why aren't you happy about this?
This is what you should want.
This is what you should want. Like, that wasn't abuse. And it's like, it still was because they can't consent to that or can't have a relationship like that and think about it enough as a minor. So it's those sort of conversations are so frustrating when you've got to like kind of break down some of like the toxic masculinity stuff or
that victim blaming.
the victim blaming or any kind of like homophobia that can like add into like making this stuff harder to talk about or religious guilt and stuff like that. If we're thinking about this happening within religious groups as well, or I know that maybe doesn't affect us up here as much as maybe in other parts of the country.
Yeah.
But still is happening.
Yeah. I think last thing before we wrap up, I'm thinking maybe who knows who this is going to reach, right? So maybe someone is listening to this and they realize, oh, maybe I'm going through this, or maybe I'm picking up just from listening to us have this conversation, some of those red flags in a relationship that I have. What would be like a takeaway or something you would want to say to someone that might be in that situation?
Yeah, I'd say like go and talk to people about it. I think the more that we're able to have those conversations in our communities and be able to show other young people that it doesn't have to be something that's like hidden and kept away.
Yeah.
But like to talk about it because I mean if you're not hearing anybody talk about it, you don't want to be that odd man out where you feel like you don't have any sense of community. And we know that when people get together and talk about stuff like this or talk about trauma or hard stuff, it's something that a lot of people identify with and then can kind of like grow that sense of community a little bit better where we can hopefully do better in the future and work on doing better as we move through these weird times and the new added pieces with technology and with being online that make things so difficult, making sure that we can kind of move through that and still be able to have conversations about it. So just really the premise of your podcast, Unlearning Out Loud, is taking the stigma off of it really, I think, is my main takeaway. And also that there's always help available and that nothing is permanent. Yeah. Right? Nothing is so bad where you're never going to be able to get help. And again, everybody, especially kids, deserve to be healthy, happy, safe, all those things. And they deserve to be able to be kids.
They do.
Even if that's not maybe what they're saying that they want.
Yeah. I think even when we're doing these lessons too, and just an important part of life is that someone needs to know what's going on and know that you need help in order for you to get the help that you deserve. So even though it can be so hard to have those conversations and it can be so hard to ask for help when we realize, oh, shoot, maybe I need help. It can be so hard, but things can get so much better once we're able to connect to those resources and get the help that we actually deserve.
And as adults, maintaining those boundaries with kids, I think it's a good reminder for everybody. I know I felt like I was kind of singling those some of those teachers out, or maybe they felt weird when I was talking to them about it this week, but really, it's a good reminder for all of us to think about those boundaries and think about how we are acting with the young people in our lives. Even I know it's hard thinking about like us being young people still in our 20s and still adults. but being young people and interacting maybe with like college-aged people or high schoolers. Yeah. Now that we're at this point, we're like, oh my gosh, I don't know why anybody would ever
babies.
want to have a relationship with someone that's so much younger than you. Yeah. That's that fully
developed brain.
But really, like just double checking those boundaries, making sure that we're not misconstruing things, we're having good boundaries with the children in our lives, whether that's again in our community, in schools, or in our families as well. So we're setting that really, really good example so that they know what boundaries look like and what adult boundaries should look like, so that if something is happening, they can kind of identify those red flags a little bit better.
Yeah. Awesome. I think that's a great point to end on with those takeaways. Thank you so much for being our first guest here. I think we talked about some really, again, hard stuff, but I think anyone who's listening to this, whether they're in our field and they do that work and they've had those conversations, or maybe it's the first time they're even like really hearing what grooming actually is, I think there's lots of things that people can take away from all the awesome intel that you shared. So thank you for coming on.
Thank you again for having me.
Awesome. Last thing I'll say before we officially wrap up our first episode is that I will link some resources related to grooming. I'll try and put them up, in the video and in the description as well. Always want to provide those resources so that if there is something going on, we have access to those resources. And on our next episode, we will be joined by one of our other awesome coworkers, Liz, and we'll talk about grief and the different ways that can show up in our lives, whether we're actually grieving someone or we're just grieving the loss of different parts of ourselves. This is our first episode. Thank you again so much for coming on. This has been Unlearning Out Loud. I will link our social media as well. It's just at Unlearning Out Loud Pod on all socials. Awesome. Thanks.